I'm Nancy Carlisle. I'm a registered dietitian, and we've been doing the cardiac support group for a long time already. Some of you that are in the audience today have been with us since the late 90s, but our support group started originally in the 1970s by Carol Lewis, who was working in the intensive care unit as a staff nurse at that time period, and she met with a VA nurse, and they formed the cardiac support group here at Mercy Hospital in conjunction with VA Hospital and the American Heart Association. They've then extended on, and we've just kept on going, and Chef Ron and I have been a part of that since we have come to Mercy, and he's been here longer than I have, but we've been having fun in doing this, so welcome today.
Okay, so today, I gave you an offering of some recipes, primarily an Italian type theme for the menu, and each time that we do the cardiac support group luncheon, I try to find recipes that, first of all, that they're tasty, they're interesting, and I also see if I can find something that has the nutritional value to it as well, so that you know what you're getting there. And each time that we do these recipes, there seems to be a little bit of a back and forth with Nancy and I, because when I start to prepare the meal, I think, well, it needs this or it needs that. And so
And I'll say, no, you can't add that.
So we're kind of stuck on that. So today we'd like to be able to show you, maybe to empower you a little bit to take some liberties with the recipes, as long as you don't change the intent or the structural integrity of the recipe. If it's a low-fat recipe or a low-sodium recipe, there's a lot you can do keeping it that way, but still change it to make it fit your own taste and your own personal liking, so that, if you don't like garlic or you don't want zucchini, just because it says that on the recipe doesn't mean that, I can't do this recipe because it says zucchini in it. Yeah. So you can make these changes, and we're going to kind of go through the recipes and maybe point out a few things that you can do, or what we've done with the recipes that make them the low fat. And these are, a little bit more of a challenge for me, because when I'm preparing food for, say, the cafeteria, and we're doing some general diets, I'll take a few more liberties in what I'm doing. But when I prepare your meals, I take and I really do measure out, for the most part, the items there, and so that we can be true to it, and then we can make the changes as a group. So, given that, maybe we can start out with the salad and work our way through.
All right.
And also today we're going to demo the entree, the Tuscan chicken and bean stew. And there's two recipes we gave you. One
was
that
the
I
one
came up with
picked.
initially that had a nutritional with it, and then when I looked at it, I said, well, it needs more. So then you've got a number two also. And the number two, you'll see that there should be maybe in a bold print some of the changes that we've made, and we'll demo the number two, the one with all the changes that are made in that, which is what you're sampling today. Mm-hmm. Okay.
More vegetables.
More vegetables for the most part, little fresh items. The green bean and tomato salad. A couple of things in here that I came up with. I did add just a little bit of salt and pepper to the recipe. There's no salt listed in it. If you're on a salt-restricted diet, obviously you want to leave it alone. But there was only 12 milligrams of sodium in it, and I felt the green beans and the tomatoes needed a little salt to bring that flavor out in them. And then the last thing that I would point out on this here is the oil and white wine vinegar on the recipe. You have two teaspoons of vinegar, or of olive oil, and 3 tablespoons of the white wine vinegar. So it's very little oil in the recipe. A lot of your vinaigrettes, a lot of your dressings will have 2 parts oil, 1 part vinegar. So there'll be more on the oil. So this recipe, the oil was cut back to reduce the fat in it, but still give you the flavor and the mouthfeel with the cold salad. So it's the other thing in here that you could do is, if you want to add some additional herbs to that, you certainly could. There's a reason why you couldn't put some onions in there, maybe some mushrooms if you'd like. So you could add to that. stay with the oil and the vinegar the same as what the recipe is calling for, because that's your objective, is to get that fat content down in there.
A flavor I might have added might have been dill, or some fresh basil also would have been a good one. Even some rosemary might have gone with that one, depending on what else I was serving as the meal.
Right. The roasted red potatoes, there's no reason why you couldn't use Yukon Gold potatoes, fingerling potatoes, russet potatoes, any of those. Just because it says red potatoes doesn't mean that's what you have to stay with. But you could take all those other ones and keep all the items in there the same as far as your seasonings, and it would be just fine. You could also change your seasonings to suit your taste. Maybe you want to put a little dried Italian seasoning in there. Even a little lemon juice would be good on there. Some little fresh rosemary or ground rosemary, a little granulated garlic. So you can play around with those flavors, but again, that ratio that you have here as far as the oil in there is what I'm shooting for. So you can use the fresh herbs or you can use the dry. And if you're using the dry, they're more concentrated, they're more powerful. So if the recipe calls for a tablespoon of fresh basil, you only want to use a teaspoon of the dry basil. That's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, you're going to have some pretty strong flavors in there. Then we're into the entree, the Tuscan chicken with the white beans and spinach. When I look at recipes, I kind of look for, something that I think that I'm going to like fixing, something that's going to taste good. I don't want to do something that's too complex, that is going to be too much hassle, because you're not going to go out and buy all the ingredients and fix that. If you do, it may be one time, then you just put it off to the side and say it's too much work. So while it's nice to do a real fancy dish or demonstrate this, and everybody says that's great, we set it on fire and we do all kinds of things. It's you're probably not going to do that at home, and that's what I want is something that you're going to work with, that you can easily duplicate. This Tuscan chicken. The Tuscan, we're talking about Italy, the region. It's a very impoverished area. It was very simplistic foods. It was more home cooking. It wasn't so much the chef type cooking as your mom cooking type thing. Basic ingredients.
Things from their garden.
From the garden type things, yeah. They, that area, they a little bit more favor of beans, I think, in that region.
They were farmers.
They take in, you'll see more stews, more as opposed to the pasta items, because they get feed more with that stew than they can with that pasta. And that's maybe not quite as true today, but that's kind of how that all came about. So we took and added olive oil, fresh zucchini, shallots, celery, carrots. So put a lot of vegetables in there that weren't in the original recipe. We also added some chicken stock, some low sodium chicken stock to the recipe, a little fresh basil, and just a little bit of Parmesan cheese at the very end, so you get that taste, but you don't have a lot of Parmesan cheese in there. So in a little bit here, we'll go through all that. But if you're taking this recipe and changing it to suit your taste, you could eliminate the chicken altogether, and you would have a great vegetarian dish. Okay, this also would work great with fish. So you could move it around, and get multiple recipes out of that one item, similar to what we've done in the past. A bruschetta type meal with the Roma tomatoes and the basil and the garlic, and put it on a salad. We put it on chicken. We put it on fish, and once you learn that one key recipe, and you don't vary too much from that amount of fat and oil in there, you can do a lot of things with it. This recipe, if you don't want zucchini, don't have it. It's not going to stop you from doing this recipe. The only other thing we'll talk about is the cookie. So the hazelnut cookie, I stayed pretty true to the recipe there. The hazelnuts, you can also find those, they'll be listed as filberts,
Filberts.
or a cob nut is another thing they'll be listed as. And, turn this on. Some of you have already probably seen this before, but this is an induction burner. It's electric. It's magnets forced against each other, generating heat. This heats up right away. This is already getting hot, but I can put my hand here and I get nothing. It's the elements working against each other that gives you that heat. It heats up right away and it cools down right away.
It allows us to do a lot of cooking demos without worrying about the fire alarms going off the sprinkler system. So canola oil could also have been used in this recipe, but we chose to use the olive oil because of the higher taste value of it and kind of staying true to the Italian part of the recipe. It wouldn't have been great to have added canola oil to an Italian Tuscan recipe for it. We were using the extra virgin olive oil.
We've got a tablespoon of the oil in there. Then I'm going to put some celery and zucchini.
The Heart Association guideline is to get 5 to 10 cups of fruits and vegetables a day. So by adding several different ones here, we're extending the recipe and being able to get lots of different colors in. The zucchini of the green and celery, the different. Celery is also going to add that little taste of salt that we are wanting from our vegetables, but we didn't add any additional sodium to it other than the natural content of the celery stalk. The carrots cooked down really nicely in this particular recipe, but still gave a lot of bright color. Great source of vitamin A, one of our antioxidants, to help us with the heart protective benefits of this recipe. And then when they're paired with the vitamin C content, going to really just be a super duper nutrient mix here.
I'm going to add some shallot. Each of these items we're adding about a half a cup. And I'm just kind of rough chopping it. So we're going to have more of a stew texture to it, so it doesn't have to be too fine. So while that's going, we'll talk a little bit about the beans that are going into this, okay? The recipe called for cannellini beans. And you could also use a northern bean or a navy bean. In most recipes you see where you call for the white bean, you can pretty much use all these interchangeably and not have any problem at all. I do have samples of each up here, and you're welcome to look at them later on. But the cannellini bean is a little bit bigger. It's more of a kidney shape. It's like a white kidney bean. It's a little firmer than the others. They got kind of a nutty texture to it.
Sometimes they call that the albino kidney bean, actually, as they're describing it.
Northern beans are a little smaller. They're more of a rounder shape to it. Maybe a little bit more grainy.
Mealier.
Yeah, a little mealier than.
We're more familiar with those in our ham and bean soup.
And then you get your navy bean, which is smaller yet, and it's more round, and it's kind of favored for like baked beans, that type of thing. Something that's really, it's a softer bean, much softer than the other two. Yeah. So, but any of those recipes, you could interchange those and make it your own.
And even if you didn't like the white beans and you had a can of kidney beans in your cupboard and you wanted to use those, that'd be perfectly fine as a substitute. I kind of sometimes just go to the cupboards and pull things out and start mixing in ingredients.
Add a little bit of mushroom to this. You've got the fresh, and you certainly add the canned if you wanted to.
The fresh will help to give some additional moisture to the product, whereas the canned already has the moisture pretty much gone out of it. They both contain some of the iron and some B vitamins and water. That's the biggest thing that mushrooms add to it.
How high a sodium is it got in canned mushrooms?
And
Pardon?
the canned mushrooms,
Sodium.
each company varies a little bit, but some of them are about 50 to 70 milligrams for a can of about a half a cup.
A little bit of garlic. Reach over here.
We're using the minced garlic, and that's such a nice thing to just keep in your refrigerator.
Get the little
jars
jars
of it, and you don't have to go to the mess of peeling the garlic. And although there's still that aroma that comes from peeling fresh garlic, you're going to have, again, some nice antioxidants, some selenium, and some good nutrients coming from your garlic. Can't prove that it is helpful for the heart, but we certainly, from the centuries, Hippocrates talked about garlic in different foods and being available to that. So
we're talking about garlic. I brought a sample here also. The recipe called for shallots, and if you're familiar with a shallot, you're gonna find in the grocery store they're gonna be like this. I get them commercially by the gallon, already cleaned. Then shallot, and you've got your garlic, which is, this is an individual clove. All your cloves are all kind of clustered together in that garlic. Now the shallots are going to grow several of them together
Several
like this
together.
at the base, but they're going to be separate cloves, so you can just snap one off.
Mm-hmm.
And the shallot actually has its own, own origin here. It's its own species, but it has a mild onion flavor with just a little hint of garlic. So it's not stronger than garlic. It's just a mild garlic taste to it, and it's a little sweeter.
they're part of the allium families, so you get that nice little stalk that comes up. It's a pretty flower. So I actually grow some shallots in my garden. They're often called winter onions in this area.
So I've got to get over to your garden because you've got kale and you've got all kinds of stuff.
I keep fun things in my garden.
Some some
That
chicken
looks
breast.
like chicken.
Now, when I did these for the luncheon, I just did the whole chicken breast. It's quicker. We're talking about a large amount as opposed to at home. You could certainly put the whole chicken breast in and cook them, or you could cut them up into the strips. And
Especially if you're making a fast meal and you want it to cook faster than cutting it into the strips. A lot of us come home and we want to make a meal very, very quickly. So making it into smaller and smaller pieces will make it cook faster for us. I think you can also even pre-cook some chicken ahead if you wanted to, and I often do that. And then I freeze some of it so you could just put it in as a frozen chicken pre-cooked too, after you've cooked your vegetables.
now the thing to keep in mind here, I use the raw chicken on the cutting board and the knife, so I don't want to take that knife and chop that spinach, which I probably should later on, but you need to take that cutting board and get rid of it, wash that knife up, warm that back up for the chicken, let that cook for a minute or two. Then we're going to add some broth to this, the low sodium broth. Diced tomatoes, I think the recipe calls for a petite dice, but just certainly just a regular diced tomato is fine. That's all I use.
If you want them petite, you can chop them in the
That's
can
right.
before, just
then
run a
put it-
knife in the can before you dump it out, and it's safer. So you're not cutting yourself as you're trying to cut little
I
squares.
see people do that where they'll put a knife in a can and try to cut it, or they'll take a pair of scissors and it's
Yeah.
like, no. And I'm going to add this broth to here to kind of coax that chicken along a little bit.
Always adding some broth or some moisture as you're cooking chicken helps to keep it from drying out. Since chicken is just basically a one muscle, it releases its water pretty quickly. So if you add some water back to it or keep it moist, and slower heat helps too.
So while we're waiting, does anybody have any questions that they're wondering about as far as recipe-wise? When I get my recipes for these events, I take in more and more. I'm going online using the internet, and there's primarily for the nutritional value. And like I said, once we find them, then I decide that, well, this doesn't quite suit me as far as a taste or what I'm out to get. We're doing a lot of work right now with recipes for our patient menus. We're looking at some new items there. This actually is one of the items that we're giving some consideration to for our patient feeding. And when I'm doing something for the cafeteria, I may look at 15 different recipes for Tuscan chicken and say, I like this idea from one, I like this idea, and then I start gathering it all together and
become Chef Ron's
and make it my
individual.
own. You know,
Yes.
and there's no reason why you can't do that at home as long as you're, keeping the main focus on making it healthy, making it low in sodium or low in fat. The other thing that I notice is that when you get online, if you're doing anything and you click on this recipe, and there'll be comments. And if you go to the comments that people who have tried a recipe out, each one of them will say, well, it was great. I ate it just like this. The next person said, I can't stand it. The next person says, I added this and this. Somebody said, we didn't have that, so we substituted something else. So these people are doing essentially the same thing. They're just making it their own and creating a.
So we have a lot of our recipes that the chef and I have done, and that is at our mercyic.org website. If you click on the Taste of Mercy section, then you can see pictures and demonstrations and some of the videos even, and the recipes will be also online there for you.
I'm going to add this fresh spinach in here. Probably I would chop it just a little bit, but I don't have a knife to work with here, so we won't.
A clean knife.
Let that wilt down just a little bit. It only takes about a minute or two.
I think one of the best things that I love that modern technology has given us is pre-washed spinach in the grocery store.
It's very nice.
I mean, it just is such a wonderful asset to be able to use. And spinach, again, such a great source of iron, a good source of vitamin A,
So
fiber content to it, and color. I mean, it just always makes it very attractive when you're adding that bright green to anything.
Now that's just some fresh basil that I put in there that I just didn't chop up here either. So we're kind of going back. It's got that green, but it's a fresh basil. The diced tomatoes and the crushed tomatoes.
And if you didn't like as much tomato sauce, you certainly wouldn't have to add it with all the other vegetables. You already have a nice mixture there too.
Okay, so this is essentially done other than just letting it simmer down for 15, 20 minutes and letting the vegetables finish off and be sure everything is hot.
So that's big skillet can
That's it in a
serve
nutshell
a
there.
lot of people quickly. Questions?
All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming. Hope you enjoyed your meal.